The beauty of The Danish Girl is that the movie takes some themes, and quite a few themes, which might be considered a little bit controversial or a little bit difficult for some people to engage with, and it presents them in a very accessible and conservative manner. In fact, some critics have complained the film for being too conservative, particularly in its treatment of transgenderism. So if you're worried about engaging with themes of homosexuality or the transgenderism theme, in my opinion anyway, I didn't find it to be as dominant in the film in a way that it tries to force you into changing your beliefs or to make you feel a certain way. It's just presented as it is. This is what it is. This is what happened to this particular person. This is what they went through. It may educate you a little bit if you're not sure about what transgenderism is. But to be honest, I think we all fairly are intelligent enough to know what it actually is. But what I'm trying to say is it doesn't sort of force it on you. This is something, if you don't particularly agree with personally, I still think you can get plenty to enjoy out of the film, especially from Eddie Redmayne's performance, which, as you'd expect, is so impressive and so just bewitching in how he undergoes yet another transformation, another experience where you see him completely transformed from one character to another through the film. So if you can go into this with an open mind, if that's something you're worried about, then, do it. Put those beliefs aside if you can, and just observe what you are going to see on screen, because it really is quite an incredible and memorable experience just watching it from the actor performance point of view. There is a little bit of violence in the film to be aware of. There is a gay bashing scene, which is quite... Well, it isn't drawn out or anything, but of course, a gay bashing incident is uncomfortable. Anybody being beaten up is something a little bit uncomfortable. And this is the only real blood in the scene is related to this particular, in the film is related to this scene after the person has been kind of kicked around a little bit and he's sort of kicked and punched and beaten by two men. Then you do see blood and a little bit of blood spatter and some bruising and scars on this man's face afterwards. Actually, if anything, I wouldn't be so worried about the violence going into the film as much as the medical procedures. If you're squeamish, even though you don't really see surgery happen, there's a lot of discussion about surgery and about, as well as not just the actual surgery and the procedures, but about the symptoms and also the possible effects that might happen, post-surgery. So, and it can be anything from stomach aches to nausea or dizziness and fainting. You do see a man collapse at one point, and the symptoms of why he's collapsed are discussed. Things like, drilling into the skull are discussed. You see a man being strapped down and tied down to a bed and forced to undergo certain treatments, which is a little bit distressing, seeing somebody kind of forced into something, and particularly when you find out that there's one procedure which he isn't really that willing to do. Or at least nowadays we know a bit more about. It's radiation therapy, and we know a bit more about how damaging radiation therapy can actually be, even when it's doing good. And so when we bring that current contemporary knowledge into it, it makes it a little bit more hard to watch. So you do see, like I said, you don't actually see surgery really happening. You do see injections happen. I mean, they happen in the background, so you don't really see the needles up close or anything, but in the background you do see needles entering skin. And again, as I said, this setting is often in a medical-based kind of areas and offices. So if you don't like being in hospitals, then just be aware of that, because quite a bit of the film does actually take place in medical settings. You also see accusations of insanity, and it seems quite archaic today, the questioning somebody's sanity because of their sexuality. And that can be a little bit distressing to watch, particularly when you see people rushing along with a straitjacket with the intention of perhaps tying somebody up or committing them because they're questioning their own sexual orientation. So, just be aware of that, if that's something that you feel, you have some objection to. It might touch you and kind of on raw nerves, if you like. Now, in terms of sex and nudity, there is a fair bit of nudity in the film. Again, it's very tastefully presented. You do see full nudity, both male and female through the film. Some of it is in sketches and drawings and artwork, which is seen, you know, behind the main actors. But you do see full female nudity front and back. With the male, you actually see him kind of place his penis between his legs. So while you don't see like a full frame shot of the male genitalia, you know what's happening, and you get very much the impression that the man is completely nude. You also see a woman who's being paid, she's being watched in a peep show environment, and she's caressing herself and touching her breasts and her throat and that kind of thing. It's very, very evocative. And you also see things like prostitutes on street corners and, you know, women in low-cut gowns and that kind of stuff. You do see a couple in the bedroom a few times, and they're kind of flirting or initiating sex, but you never see a sex scene happen. There is a bit of kissing. You see kissing between men and women as well as two men. There is a little bit of alcohol in the film. You do see people drinking wine and champagne. No illegal drugs at all, but you do see a man taking prescription pills and also being given gas before an operation. There isn't really any swearing in the film. I think there might be a little bit of, there's one derogatory term for women, I think, but no F words or anything like that. So in that sense, it's fairly tame. So the film, I mean, as I said, you know, I think it's very watchable for so many reasons. I think it's a snapshot in history. I think it's a snapshot about who we are as a human race. I think it's really interesting. The subject matter is so interesting. The people that are being, you know, highlighted here are fascinating people. In fact, as other critics have pointed out, you know, the emphasis really is on Ina Wagner, but Ina's wife, Gerda, was equally fascinating. So perhaps, you know, look at it this way, that the film might be a great starting point to learn more about these people, to learn more about their art. And, you know, as I do want to stress, the themes of the transgenderism is equally treated as, say, the other themes such as marriage and relationships and art, you know, travel, those kind of things. So, you know, as I said, the themes aren't really forced upon you if that is something that you're concerned about. The Danish Girl is directed by Tom Hooper and stars Alicia Vikander and Eddie Redmayne, who, of course, as I would expect anyway, was just superb in this role. Alicia Vikander's performance is also absolutely worth checking out. If you'd like to read a little bit more about the content in the film, particularly about those medical procedures, then by all means check out my content breakdown on my website, which is cinemum.net.